Hi everyone, my name is Anirudh and today I will be presenting about my project focusing on statistics in basketball. So, seeing the movie Moneyball, I knew immediately that I wanted to do something similar for my project this year. This movie focuses on the usage of sabermetrics, which is statistical analysis in baseball, and when used, it accurately judges MLB players to give teams the best chance of winning. This led me to my central question for my research project, which was, can statistical analysis be used to create the most complete NBA franchise? So, I chose to focus on the sport of basketball for a couple reasons. Firstly, basketball is a game that has a worldwide reach, and it's very easily understood compared to a lot of other sports. This would make my findings applicable in many different contexts. Secondly, ever since I was a kid, basketball has been my favorite sport to watch and play, so there's a personal connection. And thirdly, there are many different statistics that are tracked for each player to determine how well of a game and season they had. For a project like the one that I was doing, it was perfect because it gave me the opportunity to gather a wide variety of data. So first, I'm going to discuss how I came up with my project idea. Within games and playoff series, opposing teams make adjustments to their game plan to most effectively counter the other team and get themselves a win. Basketball is a reactive sport, so as you make the right decisions based on what the defense gives you, and the teams that adapt best see the most success. Now, the best way that teams can make adjustments is by knowing what the other side is most likely to do, and nothing provides definitive information like data. And a statistic from 2021 showed that all 30 NBA teams have a dedicated data analytics department. This insight helped lead me to my project's methodology and process. So after doing some further research, I found that there was one specific area that nobody had previously explored. Many lineups in the NBA are based simply on who is the best fit at each position, and teams are often constructed around a certain mold or architecture. But what was never looked into was statistics being the sole driving force behind the team's construction. Some of the best teams in NBA history were statistically great, but this only came as a product of their on-court results. The gap that I chose to explore looked further into the opposite route, where you created the best statistical team and see if the on-court results would follow. I took a 4-step approach for my experiment, and as previously mentioned, step 1 was my topic selection and my gap analysis. Step 2 involved one aspect of my project, which was focused on the players on the team. I used statistics to assemble different rosters. The third step focused on the actual NBA franchise rather than just the team. I focused on location, team names, and team jersey designs as mentioned on the slides. And finally, I gathered my data and found out whether there was a true benefit to using statistics in both aspects of my experiment. This section would focus on the team building component of my project. After looking through many championship winning teams from the past and seeing if there were any similarities between all of them, I came to a conclusion that there is a typical composition for every successful NBA team. There are 4 categories that are often meant to guarantee a successful season. 1. Every successful NBA team has a superstar. That one player who, regardless of the night, will light the scoreboard up and create plays. Now, not every night is a showstopper, but they are the best player on a contending team and can take over games when needed to. Speaking of a supporting cast, every great team has an assist man. This is the player that creates the plays, the one who takes the ball up the court, finds an open teammate, and sets them up with a great pass to get a wide open shot. Sometimes the superstar is the assist man, but many great teams have at least one of these players who can find open players and get the right plays at the right time. The third group is what I like to call 3-and-D players. Now, as it says on the screen, the 2 main objectives for these players are make 3-point shots and play good defense against the best players on the other team. These are players who might not show up on a nightly basis, but they are the unheralded heroes on every single team. And finally, every team has what I like to call a glue guy. Now, these players come in many different forms. They can be locker room leaders who rally the team when faced with deficits. They can be good bench players who, when given the opportunity, can keep their team in a game with reliable minutes and are willing to do whatever is needed to succeed. Or they can just be players who keep the vibes of the team good and keep players relaxed in high-stress scenarios. All great teams typically follow this mold, and it leads to a balanced but potent NBA team. Now, Players like LeBron James, Michael Jordan, Steph Curry, and Kobe Bryant are all examples of superstars in NBA history. These four guys revolutionized the game, and they were able to dominate the court on any given night. Now, players like John Stockton, Magic Johnson, Chris Paul, or Jason Kidd are all examples of assist people. Their main roles on the teams that they played for was creating plays and making shots when needed. Players like Danny Green, Shane Battier, Bruce Bowen, and Kentavious Caldwell-Pope are all examples of grade 3 and D guys. These players are often forgotten next to superstars in NBA history, but played crucial roles for success of their respective teams and were all rewarded with NBA championships. And finally, the glue guys, Draymond Green, Malik Monk, Scottie Pippen, and Big Shot Bob or Robert Horry. They're all perfect examples because they did whatever their team needed to win. They're players that superstars know to count on, and when they need to deliver, they deliver. So I thought, is it better to follow this typical composition of NBA teams, or go on a different route, focusing solely on statistical dominance, making a team that is best based on the cold, hard numbers? I started my experiment by looking at different statistical categories, and the 7 that I chose to look into were 3-point shots made, 3-point shot percentage, assists per game, points per game, efficiency, offensive rating, and true shooting percentage. The next step was gathering the players and assembling a roster using the 15 best players in each statistical category in NBA 2K23. I chose to use the game because, honestly, it was the only real way for me to test my project and get results given the different scenarios that I had to create and the different things that I needed to do, as well as the time frame that I was simulating over. Now, given that a typical NBA team has 5 starters and 10 bench players, I set this up by having the highest ranked player from each position be the starter for that position. There are 5 positions on an NBA court: point guard, shooting guard, small forward, power forward, and center. And the minutes were automatically determined by the computer to reduce any sort of potential bias. And for the bench, I just simply went in terms of the highest ranking. So players that were ranked higher were higher up on the bench order. I chose to use the New York Knicks as a franchise, the same coach and GM, Steve Kerr and Pat Riley, respectively. And this was all done to reduce any potential bias. For the players that were on the Knicks, I moved these players to an expansion team and gave them 0 minutes to make sure that they didn't impact the experiment. I also updated computer AI players to have attributes of these star players and make sure that moving these players around didn't cause disparity in the league. I then simulated the NBA for 5 years and saw how the team performed from year to year, with my main data collection being regular season win-loss records. I chose to use the regular season and not the playoffs because playoffs become more about luck rather than the regular season, and I wanted to try and eliminate any source of inaccuracy. And finally, I took the averages of the 5-year span to see the average performance in the regular season for each of my constructed teams. Now, this is going to focus on the franchise construction portion of my project. There are 3 good factors that determines how successful an NBA franchise is: location, where a team plays; marketability, the logo, the jerseys, the sponsors, and other things; and the facilities, the stadiums, the training facilities, equipment, and more. So, the way that I use statistics here was looking at all professional sports cities across the United States and Canada to see which potential cities would be the best fit for hosting an NBA team. I got rid of all cities that already had an NBA team because that was pretty redundant, and then I used statistics such as land area, population, and average fan attendance to make an informed decision about which cities would be the best suited to introduce a new expansion team. For marketability, I looked into important features and aspects of all of the cities that I chose to use, looked at important city and state colors for the jerseys, and used these 2 statistics and data collections to come up with the team name and jersey design, and then implemented the actual expansion team using NBA 2K23's MyGM mode. As for the stadium, I wanted to use sponsors that had a personal connection to the team based on sharing a state or city with the professional team. Now, this would be fitting for the naming of the stadium because it's great to have connections with the sponsors of your team. So now we'll look at some of the data that I actually collected. So as you can see here, this is the player portion of statistics, and this is the data that I was able to collect. I collected 5 years worth of data, as I explained before, and I used Google Sheets to graphically represent. The red bars represent losses, the green bars represent wins, and in general, the more green the bar is, the better the team performed. So here you can see 3-point shots made and 3-point shot percentage. Here were my results for the points per game and assists per game. This was my data representation for efficiency and offensive rating. And finally, my graph for true shooting percentage. And this was actually the average win-loss records for each stat category over 5 years. So looking at the average graph, you can see over here, this is all of the stat categories that I chose to use. On the side, you can see that the interval goes from 30 wins to 82 wins because that's the max you can have in one NBA season. And after doing some analysis, I saw that the two best statistical categories that I tested were efficiency and points per game, which was pretty interesting because I thought that it would be something more like 3-point shots made, given that it is actually the most valuable shot in the NBA. But it turns out that having a good and efficient team is what leads to more regular season success. So to reduce any potential biases in my franchise construction, I used a random fantasy draft to create entirely new teams with the addition of 5 NBA franchises. And this meant that players would be as evenly distributed as possible, with brand new teammates essentially randomizing the NBA. These are 2 examples of teams that I was actually able to create, and I'm just going to explain. So the Montreal Royals was one of the teams that I created. Obviously, Montreal is a very highly populated city, the second most in Canada. It has more than enough land space to hold an NBA franchise. It's actually named after Mount Royal, which is a monument of Montreal. And I thought that it could share a team with the Montreal Canadiens, the local hockey team in Bell Centre. And the colors of the team were white and red because these are 2 of the prominent colors on Montreal's city flag. The next one was the New Jersey Aces. Obviously, we had an NBA franchise in New Jersey before it got relocated to Brooklyn. It has sufficient population and land area. The name actually comes from the ace card in a deck, given that Atlantic City has a lot of casinos. I thought that it could share a stadium with the New Jersey Devils in Prudential Center. Prudential is actually a company based in New Jersey. And finally, the colors would be sky blue, white, and gold because these are important flag colors for New Jersey and Atlantic City and Newark, which are where the teams would be based on and located. So after my research concluded, I was able to look at my data and come to a final answer and conclusion for my research question. Now, statistics are important for team building, but they shouldn't be the determining factor for roster construction. Many times in the past, this has been attempted by forming super teams, which are statistically great teams that very rarely end up actually winning anything. I concluded that using statistics along with following the typical roster construction leads to the best overall results, both on and off the court. For franchises, I think that are interested in becoming an expansion team, I do feel that statistics are useful because using numbers helped me find the best cities to begin franchises in and helped me create a team that had overall high fan satisfaction and fan attendance. So to answer my research question, yes, statistics can be used to an extent to construct the most complete NBA franchise, both on and off the court. So some implications of my project could be for coaches at all levels of organized basketball, because using statistics can help form a roster and lineup that gives their team the best chance of winning any given game. Furthermore, teams can use my findings to adjust their team branding with my given methodology, looking at the city's relationship with the team. Now, while this project was pretty successful, there were definitely some limitations in my research. For one, I couldn't really conduct my tests in real life given how much organization, time, and cooperation would be needed. After all, I am only a high school senior in AP Research talking about professional NBA players, so this was definitely unrealistic to try and attempt in real life. Moreover, there were some parts of the data collection that I couldn't really control simply due to the fact that I was limited to what the game offered me. But if I was to continue my research in the future, I would want to look into other aspects of the game that I could test. For example, what equipment, such as shoes, that each player wears and how it impacts their performance, the brand of balls that are used and how that impacts performance, and etc. And I think that this data could be useful because it would be a lot more applicable for coaches in my current setting, which is high school. This is my works cited page, and thank you very much.
Okay, first question. After you chose your research question project goal, which information guided your choice of a research method or creative process?
So obviously, as I explained in the beginning of my presentation, I chose to look at statistics from the onset of my project. And I think that one important source of information was actually looking at how statistics are used in basketball currently. I learned a lot about teams and coaches using statistics to make informed decisions based on the numbers. And I think that having that information with me was really useful because it saw and kind of guided the way that I wanted to employ statistics in my own project, making sure that I could basically get the most accurate data to answer my question.
Thank you.
Which of the various perspectives you explored was the most difficult for you to incorporate into your research inquiry, and why?
So I think that the most difficult perspective from this research topic would be like the personal connections on an NBA team. Obviously, players have connections with other players on the roster for their NBA team, and unfortunately, I wasn't really able to see like how this could be adjusted with statistics, given that I can't really force AI players to have connections with each other. That's just kind of based on what the game gave to me. So that was definitely a limitation, and that was something that, given the resources, I would have liked to explore further, but unfortunately, I wasn't really able to.
Okay. Which of your sources was the most influential, and in what way is that influence apparent in your final conclusion?
So I would say that the source that was most influential for me was actually the NBA statistic tracking page. Obviously, I had an entire portion of my project dedicated to just player statistics, and having the NBA, which is the official league for basketball professionally, have an advanced metrics page and a stat tracking page was really useful because one, it helped me get a rough idea for what statistics that I wanted to use so that I could get an accurate reading. And secondly, obviously for creating the teams, it was useful because that's where I was able to get my top 15 players from, and that's where I was able to see which of the trends was more likely to show up as more successful in my actual project.
Any other questions from the panel? Any questions from the audience? All right, thank you.